Today we uncover the shocking truth about UK tinned coconut milk. Walk down the world foods aisle of any British supermarket and you'll find a wall of tins that all promise more or less the same thing. Coconut, water, done. That's what the picture on the front tells you. That's what decades of curry nights and Thai green sauces have trained us to expect. But turn a surprising number of those tins around and the ingredient list tells a very different story. One of Britain's biggest supermarkets is selling a popular brand that uses a preservative that's recognized as a trigger for people with asthma and sulphite sensitivity. Sitting quietly in small print while shoppers reach for it week after week without a second thought. There's a coconut product on British shelves right now that actually contains dairy. Two well-known brands can't even seem to agree with themselves on what's in their own tin, with wildly different ingredient lists showing up depending on where you buy them. And one brand on this list was formerly linked to a genuinely troubling sourcing practice, and it's still sitting on British shelves today, just not the ones you'd expect. Some of us remember when coconut milk barely existed in a standard British kitchen at all. It arrived properly in the 1990s, and the 2000s riding in on the back of Thai curries and home cooking shows, and for a lot of families, it became the thing that turned an ordinary Tuesday night into something a bit special. For anyone who grew up with a grandmother who kept a block of creamed coconut in the pantry, or a mum who swore by grating fresh coconut into a curry rather than reaching for a tin, this whole category probably feels like it's drifted a long way from where it started. Once the tins arrived, that changed everything. It was meant to be simple, coconut and water, nothing more complicated than that. A lot of us assumed, reasonably, that it was. The tins were supposed to be the shortcut, not a whole new set of things to worry about. That's really what this investigation is about. Not telling anyone to stop enjoying a good curry night, but making sure the shortcut hasn't quietly cost more than the time it saves. So we went and checked what's actually sitting in the tins British shoppers are buying right now. We looked at the ingredients, the sourcing, and the ethics behind the major brands currently on UK supermarket shelves. And we're going to reveal the 13 coconut milk brands you have to avoid, and then we'll tell you the handful that are actually still worth your money. But before we get into it, if you find this kind of investigation useful, hit that like button, and if you really want to help, tap the hype button too. It genuinely helps push videos like this in front of more shoppers who deserve to know what's in their trolley. We're not asking for that to boost a channel. We're asking because the more people who see this, the more pressure there is on these companies to actually improve and to start being honest about what's really going into our food. And let's get into it. Number 13. Tesco Coconut Milk. Tesco's own brand tin is the one an enormous number of us reach for automatically, because it's Tesco, because it's everywhere, and because own brand usually feels like the safe, sensible choice. The current ingredient list shows coconut extract at 51%, water, and then 2 stabilisers, guar gum and sodium carboxymethylcellulose, plus an emulsifier, sucrose esters of fatty acids. None of that sounds alarming on its own, but it's worth sitting with for a second. This is the biggest grocer in the country, selling its most basic version of a product that should need nothing more than coconut and water, and it still needed 3 separate editions just to hold itself together on the shelf. If the biggest name in British retail can't manage a simple 2-ingredient tin, it's worth asking what chance the smaller brands further down this list ever really had. Number 12. Asda Coconut Milk. Asda's standard tin actually beats Tesco on coconut content, with coconut extract making up 70% of the can, alongside water, guar gum, carboxymethylcellulose, and an emulsifier called polysorbate 60. On paper, that's a stronger percentage than most of the other own brands here, but look at where it's actually packed, and the picture changes. This tin isn't produced anywhere near the UK, it's packed in the Philippines, thousands of miles from the shelf it ends up on. That's not automatically a problem in itself. Plenty of good coconut comes from that part of the world, but it's worth knowing exactly how far your Tuesday night curry ingredient has travelled before it lands in your trolley. And if you pick up the reduced fat version instead, thinking you're making the healthier choice, the coconut extract drops all the way down to 35%, with the same additive still doing the work of holding it together for a price that barely reflects how much water you're actually buying. Number 11. Sainsbury's coconut milk. Sainsbury's actually comes out on top for raw coconut content among the big own brands, with the label listing coconut at 75%. That should be good news, and in one sense it is. But the ingredient list also includes something none of the other major own brands use in quite the same way, a preservative called sodium metabisulfite alongside polysorbate 60 and carboxymethylcellulose. Sodium metabisulfite is a sulphite, and sulphites are recognized as a potential trigger for some people with asthma or existing sulphite sensitivity, according to general food safety guidance. It's the kind of ingredient most shoppers glance straight past, tucked in after the more familiar-sounding stabilisers on a can that otherwise boasts the best coconut percentage of the entire own brand lineup. It's a reminder that a strong headline number, 75% coconut, doesn't automatically mean the rest of the label is simple, and it pays to read past the first ingredient rather than stopping there. Sulphites have been used as food preservatives for a very long time, long before most of us were doing weekly curry nights at all. But that history doesn't make them something every shopper wants to be drinking through unknowingly, especially anyone who's noticed a mild reaction after a meal and never quite worked out why. Number 10. Blue Dragon coconut milk. Blue Dragon has built a genuinely strong reputation in British kitchens, and part of that reputation is well earned. Their creamed coconut block really is just coconut, nothing else added, and a lot of home cooks who've discovered that have quietly assumed the same must be true of the tinned coconut milk sitting right next to it on the shelf. It isn't. The tinned version lists coconut extract at 56%, water, a stabilizer known as E466, an emulsifier called E435, and citric acid. To be fair to Blue Dragon, those E numbers are printed plainly on the tin, nothing is hidden. But that's exactly the trap. A trusted name on the front of the pack does a lot of heavy lifting, and it's easy to let one clean product in a brand's range convince you that everything with that same logo is made the same way. In this case, it isn't. And it's worth remembering that a brand's reputation is only ever as good as the specific product you've actually picked up. Number 9. KTC coconut milk. KTC has become one of the go-to names for anyone cooking proper curries and Caribbean dishes at home. The kind of brand that feels authentic because it's the one you'll find stacked in genuinely serious Indian and Caribbean grocers, not just the supermarket aisle. That reputation is exactly why this one matters. The label lists coconut extract at 54.5%, water, and then 3 separate additions gar gum and xanthan gum and polysorbate 60. That's the heaviest additive combination of any of the mainstream brands we've looked at so far. None of this makes KTC dishonest. The ingredients are all there on the tin for anyone who checks. But it's worth knowing that the brand you might reach for specifically because it feels more traditional than the supermarket's own name is carrying just as much stabilizer as the products it's supposed to be more authentic than. A lot of us assume that the tin from the specialist grocer, the one that looks less polished and more like it belongs in a proper kitchen, must automatically be the more honest choice. This is a good example of why that assumption doesn't always hold up. Number 8. Maggi coconut milk powder. This one's a bit different from everything else on the list so far, and it caught us off guard too. Maggi's coconut milk powder, the kind a lot of households keep in the cupboard because it lasts forever and just needs mixing with warm water, lists its ingredients as coconut milk powder at 78%. Maltodextrin, milk protein, specifically sodium caseinate, and a stabilizer called trisodium phosphate. Read that again. Milk protein. In a product called coconut milk, if you're buying this because you're avoiding dairy, because someone in the house has a milk allergy, or simply because you assumed a coconut product was automatically plant-based, that's exactly the kind of detail that could catch you out. It's clearly labeled, so nobody's hiding it, but it's the kind of thing that's easy to miss when the whole point of buying coconut milk in the first place is that it isn't supposed to contain dairy at all. Powdered coconut milk has always had its place. It's convenient, It lasts for months in a cupboard, and plenty of households have relied on it for exactly that reason. But convenience is one thing, and quietly reintroducing dairy into a product bought specifically to avoid it is quite another. Number 7. Morrison's Reduced Fat Coconut Milk. This one is almost entirely water. According to the current ingredient list, Morrison's Reduced Fat tin contains just 21% coconut extract, with guar gum, polysorbate 60, and citric acid making up the rest of the workload alongside the water. Nearly 4/5 of the can is water, dressed up in packaging that looks close enough to the full-strength version that a lot of shoppers won't clock the difference until they're stirring a noticeably thinner curry. To be fair where fairness is due, Morrison's made a genuinely positive change recently. According to trade press reporting from spring 2025, the supermarket switched its own brand sourcing to 2 Thai suppliers independently verified as free from the forced monkey labour that's affected parts of this industry. Something we'll come back to shortly. That's a real improvement worth acknowledging, and credit where it's due. It just doesn't change the fact that this particular tin is offering shoppers a lot less coconut for a similar price to the full-fat version sitting right next to it. Number 6. East End Coconut Milk Light. East End is a familiar name to a lot of households who cook regularly with Indian, Caribbean, or East Asian flavors, and their light coconut milk manages to combine 2 of the weaker traits we've seen so far into one tin. The ingredient list shows just 27% coconut milk extract, meaning nearly 3/4 of the can is water, alongside guar gum, an emulsifier, citric acid, and, once again, sodium metabisulfite. So you've got heavy dilution and a sulphite preservative in the same product. Neither of those things is unique on this list on its own, but finding both together in a can already stripped down to 1/4 coconut is a genuinely poor combination, and one that's easy to miss if you're simply reaching for a lighter option out of habit. Number 5. Tropical Sun Coconut Milk. Tropical Sun is a brand a lot of British households already trust, especially anyone who cooks regularly with Caribbean, Thai, or South Asian flavors, which makes the ingredient list on their standard tin genuinely surprising. According to the manufacturer's own published details, this can contains coconut extract, water, guar gum, distilled monoglyceride, polysorbate 60, sodium carboxymethyl cellulose, xanthan gum, and sodium metabisulfite. That's 7 separate additives in a single tin, more than any other product on this list, and more than almost anything else sitting in a typical British kitchen cupboard. 3 different gums, an emulsifier, a monoglyceride, and a sulphite preservative, all doing work that a simple, well-made coconut milk shouldn't need. For a brand that markets itself so heavily on tropical natural imagery, coconuts on the packaging, sunshine colours, the promise of authentic island cooking, this is about as far from simple as coconut milk gets in a British supermarket. Hold on to that thought, because it's about to become relevant again later in this video in a way you might not expect. Number 4. TRS Coconut Milk. Here's where we have to be completely honest with you because it's genuinely useful information in its own right, and it's exactly the kind of thing Protect Our Plates exists to dig into. We tried to pin down exactly what's in a tin of TRS coconut milk, and we couldn't get a straight answer. Depending on which UK retailer's listing you check, this tin shows up with wildly different ingredients. Some list it as simply coconut extract and water, nothing else. Others list a coconut percentage in the 60s with guar gum, carboxymethyl cellulose, polysorbate 60, and citric acid. And at least one current UK listing shows an even higher coconut percentage with a sulphite preservative on top of all of that. That's not us being vague, that's the actual state of the information available to shoppers right now. It strongly suggests different batches, different suppliers, or different product lines are being sold under the same name. And there's genuinely no reliable way to know which one is in the tin on the shelf in front of you until you physically pick it up and read that specific can every single time you buy it. Number 3. Pride Coconut Milk. Pride has exactly the same problem as TRS, and it's worth flagging together because it points to something bigger than either brand on its own. Some UK sellers list Pride's coconut milk as a fairly simple 65% coconut extract, water, and guar gum. Others list a version with 6 separate additions, including xanthan gum, carboxymethylcellulose, distilled monoglycerides, polysorbate 60, and sodium metabisulfite. Those are 2 completely different products, and both are currently being sold under the exact same brand name to UK shoppers, sometimes even in the same shop on the same shelf. If you genuinely want to know what's in your coconut milk, the honest advice is that the brand name alone isn't enough anymore. You have to read the actual tin in your hand every single time, because it might not match what you bought last month or what the tin next to it on the shelf contains. Number 2. Aldi coconut milk. The Asia range. Aldi has built its entire reputation around the idea that cheaper doesn't have to mean worse. And to be fair, on raw coconut content, their Asia range coconut milk actually does reasonably well, with coconut extract at 68%. But the ingredient list still includes guar gum, carboxymethylcellulose, and sucrose esters of fatty acids. As an emulsifier, the same 3 additive pattern you'll find in some of the pricier brands on this list. In other words, paying less doesn't necessarily buy you a simpler tin. It's a good reminder for anyone assuming that budget automatically means basic, or that spending more automatically buys you fewer additives. In this category, that link isn't as reliable as you'd hope, and it's worth remembering the next time you're tempted to assume the cheapest tin on the shelf must automatically be the most basic one, or that the pricier option next to it is necessarily any cleaner. Number 1. Chow Cocoa coconut milk. This is the one that matters most, and it isn't really about additives at all. Chow Co has long been one of the biggest names in Thai coconut milk, instantly recognizable by its orange and white can. But according to a series of investigations by Peter Asia, carried out over several years, parts of Thailand's coconut harvesting industry, including supply chains linked to Chowco, have relied on forced monkey labor, with macaques trained and kept in conditions that have been widely criticized by animal welfare groups and eventually acknowledged as a real issue by the Thai government itself. In response, Tesco delisted the brand entirely. Waitrose committed to never knowingly stocking products linked to the practice. Asda pulled it from shelves while investigating its suppliers. Sainsbury's dropped it too. Chowco has disputed elements of the reporting, and it's fair to say that not every claim has been settled beyond doubt. What is clear and confirmed is that every major UK supermarket that once stocked Chowco has since walked away from it on their own shelves. The trouble is, walking away from your own shelves doesn't make a brand disappear. Chowco is still available in the UK today through Amazon and through independent Asian grocers who never signed up to any of those commitments. So the tin can still end up in a British kitchen, just via a slightly less visible route than it used to. It's worth saying plainly that most of us buying a tin of coconut milk off a shelf have absolutely no way of knowing any of this just by looking at the can. The orange and white packaging looks exactly like it always has. There's no warning, no note on the label, nothing to tell a shopper that this particular brand carries a history that several major British retailers have already decided they wanted no part of. That gap between what's printed on the tin and what's actually known about how the coconuts inside it were picked is exactly the kind of thing worth knowing before it ends up in your trolley out of habit. That's the full avoid list. 13 brands, and 13 genuinely different reasons for being here, from watered-down value to sulphites to hidden dairy, to 2 brands that apparently can't agree with themselves, to a sourcing story that goes well beyond what's printed on the label. It's a lot to take in, and if you've made it this far, you've probably already started mentally running through what's sitting in your own cupboard right now. Before we get to the brands actually worth buying, it's worth knowing what to look for yourself next time you're standing in that aisle. The simplest test is the ingredient list itself. A genuinely good coconut milk should really only need 2 things on it: coconut or coconut extract, and water. Nothing else. If the list runs to 3, 4, or more additions, that's usually more about shelf life and texture than it is about the quality of what you're actually buying. It's also worth remembering that separation isn't a fault, A layer of thick cream sitting on top of thinner liquid underneath is what real unstabilized coconut milk naturally does. A quick stir fixes it in seconds. That's not a fault or a sign the product has gone off. It's actually one of the clearest signs you've picked a good one. And given everything we've just covered about TRS and pride, it's worth checking the tin in your hand rather than trusting the memory of what you bought last time. Because the same brand name clearly doesn't guarantee the same tin twice anymore. Country of origin is worth a glance too, not because coconut from any one place is automatically better, but because of everything we've just covered about where some of this supply chain has come from. First, Tropical Sun's 100% natural coconut milk. Remember Tropical Sun from earlier, sitting further up this list with 7 separate additives to its name. Here's the twist. The same company also makes a completely different product, sold under the name 100% natural in both tin and carton form, and the ingredient list on that one reads simply coconut extract and water. Depending on the format, the coconut content runs between roughly 48 and 65%, nothing else. It's proof that this brand was always capable of making a clean, honest tin. They just chose to sell a far more complicated version alongside it. This one naturally separates in the tin, so give it a stir, and it's often priced close to, sometimes even below, the far more processed version sitting next to it on the same shelf, which makes the whole situation a little harder to excuse. If you've been buying Tropical Sun's standard tin for years without ever noticing there was a cleaner option from the same company sitting nearby, you're far from alone. And it's exactly the sort of small switch that costs nothing but a bit of attention at the shelf. Second, ClearSpring Organic Coconut Milk. ClearSpring's organic coconut at 45% with nothing else added. What sets it apart from most of the other products on this list isn't just the short ingredient list, it's where it comes from. ClearSpring sources its coconuts from Sri Lanka rather than Thailand, which means it sits entirely outside the sourcing concerns we covered a moment ago. It's positioned and priced as a more premium product than the supermarket-owned brands. So it won't be the cheapest tin on the shelf, but for anyone who wants both a clean ingredient list and a bit of extra reassurance about where their coconut actually came from, it's a genuinely solid option worth the extra cost. Third, Biona Organic Coconut Milk. Biona's coconut milk is about as straightforward as this category gets. Coconut at 50% and water with no emulsifiers and no stabilisers at all. The can itself is BPA-free, and the product has picked up a Great Taste Award along the way. It's not just our own research pointing this one out either. Long-time buyers across cooking and food forums keep landing on Biona independently, again and again, as the brand they've switched to once they've actually read a few labels and started comparing. It tends to sit at the pricier end of the category, and like the others in this section, it's more likely to turn up online or in health food shops than on a standard supermarket shelf. But for anyone who wants the simplest possible tin, it's hard to beat. It's a genuinely rare thing in this category, a product that does exactly what the front of the tin implies, nothing more and nothing less. So there you have it, 13 coconut milk brands worth a second look next time you're stocking up for curry night, and 3 that genuinely earn their place in your cupboard. What's clear from all of this is that a familiar name on the front of a tin doesn't tell you much about what's actually inside it. That price doesn't always track with simplicity, and that in a couple of cases, even the brand itself doesn't seem entirely consistent about what it's putting in the can. For a product that's supposed to be one of the simplest things in the whole supermarket, coconut milk has quietly become one of the least predictable. And that's exactly the sort of thing worth knowing before your next big shop. None of this means throwing every tin in the cupboard away tonight, or panicking over a curry you cooked last week. It just means treating coconut milk with the same bit of label-reading skepticism a lot of us have already learned to apply to bread, to cream, and to plenty of other things that used to be simple too. Let us know in the comments what you think. Do you already reach for one of the brands on our better list, or did one of tonight's avoid entries turn up in your own cupboard? Have you noticed coconut milk that used to separate suddenly not separating anymore? Do you remember making your own from a fresh coconut or a block, the way a lot of households used to before the tins took over? We'd genuinely like to know. And if you haven't already, subscribe, because there are plenty more of these investigations still to come, covering the everyday products sitting in British kitchens right now. Before you go, hit that like button and tap the hype button too, because the more people who see videos like this, the more pressure there is on these companies to actually clean up what they're putting in our food. And let us know in the comments what you'd like us to investigate next. Until next time, stay sharp, stay informed, and protect your plate.